Hello, this is Dr. Funda Goldman. Today I was going to talk to you about homeopathy for discovering your true life path. And more specifically, I was going to talk about the Bach Flower remedy, wild oat, in this context. Before we get too far along, just note the information presented here is for educational purposes only and should not be considered medical advice. For any symptoms that persist or worsen, please consult with a qualified medical professional. It's always best in the medical context to determine the root cause of any disease or problem and to develop a comprehensive treatment plan. And while homeopathy, Bach Flower remedies can be very effective, as I have found in my practice, they may not always be appropriate for everyone, and they may not be appropriate as a single therapy, so please keep that in mind. Just a few words about homeopathy and Bach Flower remedies in general. So, Bach Flower remedies are a kind of homeopathy, and homeopathy is a paradigm of energy medicine. And I've actually covered more background and history about homeopathy and Bach Flower remedies in my first Bach Flower video, the Walnut Bach Flower, so you can check that out if that's interesting to you. The general concept, though, with Bach Flower remedies is that disease stems from a deeper internal struggle. And so I found Bach Flower remedies to be particularly effective for mental, emotional, and spiritual conditions. If this sort of stuff is interesting to you, you can check out my homeopathy or Bach Flower remedies playlist. I'm pretty good at organizing my videos so that they're easier to find. In any case, the specific Bach Flower remedy, wild oat, that I'm discussing today, the keynote, sort of the guiding symptom of when somebody might be helped by this remedy, is that there's confusion about professional direction because their life mission has not been discovered. And I'll talk more about what that might look like or how it might manifest itself. But again, the inner struggle here is that this person or people who might need this remedy are looking outside of themselves for direction instead of listening or following or surrendering to internal or higher guidance. Because professional direction may actually be quite a bit different than life mission. So let's talk a little bit more about wild oat symptoms and how that might look in somebody. So somebody who is in a wild oat state or might benefit from wild oat, they may be somebody who from childhood they may have had ambitions. They can be ambitious, but there doesn't seem to be a clear direction as to how to use. They can often be very gifted in many different areas, and they may have a lot of opportunities, but they never kind of, it never seems to really go, in a particular way. Nothing really sort of, they may get to a certain point, but it never feels like enough. They don't really feel fulfilled. It's just, they have so much, given to them or within them, but it just doesn't seem to sort of congeal into something that really levels or is equivalent to what they have to offer. So there's some frustration there, and so they tend to want to do something kind of unique and fulfilling. That's on their mind on some level. These people might also find it difficult to really fit into groups, so they might get involved with different groups, and then they find that the different groups don't really kind of match their level of intellect or depth, and so they may be frustrated or disappointed when they join different groups, or they may not stay with groups for very long because it is a mismatch. There may be issues or seeming issues with like a lack of commitment or even a lack of self-definition. Like they may not be able to clearly, because they can't, part of the reason why they can't define their goal is because they can't really define themselves. And so externally, again, this person might have many careers or be kind of a job hopper. They kind of move from one thing to the next, but it's not like the sort of, as they're moving, through different jobs, they're not building momentum in a particular direction. And so, this, and also, from a young age, this person may not have been encouraged to make their own decisions, and take responsibility for the decisions, early on, whether good or bad. And so they may not like making decisions for that reason. And so they may be labeled as somebody who's commitment phobic, or immature, or fickle, or overly optimistic, or romantic, because again, they seem to have all this potential that just doesn't really get off the ground. And they feel it as well, so it's not just sort of like a external judgment, but it's an internal struggle. So the risk for somebody who's in this sort of chronic wild oat state is that they don't feel fulfilled, they don't feel grounded, they don't feel accomplished, because there's this mismatch between their abilities and what they're able to accomplish in the material world. And they may have regrets because they tried this and they try that, and they may end up squandering quite a bit of their time and energy. And when all is said and done at the end of their life, they may ask themselves, what did I do with my life, and was it meaningful? So the potential outcome, though, for somebody who does decide to work with the wild oat remedy is that they potentially will have a calmer and clearer mind and sense of direction, and will not get as easily distracted by every new opportunity that comes along. They may develop more depth instead of breadth, and they will actually potentially reach their true full potential. And they may find that actually the way that's best for them to move in life is in circles instead of straight lines. And what I mean by this is, I think about somebody like Steve Jobs, who, was famous for building the Apple company and developing the Apple computer. And it's kind of funny. And part of his story is that I guess when he was an undergrad, he somehow decided to take, I think it was a Chinese calligraphy class or something like that, which seems kind of random. But actually, because of that class, apparently, it, either changed his aesthetics or his awareness of aesthetics or something like that. And that class, he, I think, attributes that class to, the whole Apple computer being very design oriented. And so here this guy is, wanders into this class that seems to be, not very relevant, for life or profession, but it actually ended up being quite important and influential. So it's a different way of moving through life, and again, it may seem sometimes like we're running around in circles, but as long as we're learning, even if it seems like we come back to the same spot, if you've changed internally, your experience and response to that same spot will be different. So it's kind of a different mindset about how to move through life, really. And also for somebody who's a wild oat person, they may actually be a true leader or pioneer, such as Steve Jobs. And so the issue is that here they are trying to fit themselves into the current world, when really their mission is to create a new world, rather than, again, fit into the current landscape. And so, again, through taking this remedy, they could potentially discover their true north. Like, I can't imagine Gandhi or Martin Luther King Jr. or Mother Teresa going into a career office, to a career counselor, and them telling them, oh, hey, I want to liberate India, or, I want social justice for, people of color, or I want social justice for the poor, I want basic amenities for the poor. it's hard to imagine them getting, like, besides, like, how do you fit all that on a resume, or, I don't know that there is really like a career path per se, but they found their way and they made, huge, differences in the world. And so, again, I think the way they found their way in life is because they had to keep looking within themselves, tuning in, and, connecting with, their higher guidance. Because it probably didn't make a lot of sense for most people who are sort of more, sort of job oriented. Who are just thinking, okay, I'm doing this job, for a steady paycheck or something, which is perfectly fine and legitimate. But, I think if somebody is really asking, like, what am I really meant to do? That's potentially a very different question than how do I, pay the bills. So, yeah. And so, besides the Bach Flower remedy, wild oat, I did want to mention a few other methods or things that may be helpful if this is a question that's on your mind. And I know that I've definitely had to tap into these things because my life path has not been traditional. Actually, before I decided to go to medical school for naturopathic medicine, I was working, organizing clinical trials for a big hospital. And on the weekends and evenings, I was doing photography and working with a professional photographer as an assistant and doing my own projects and work. And, I thought they were both very interesting. And so, but it came to a point where I felt like, okay, I was supposed to move forward, but forward with what? And so I simultaneously applied to medical school and I applied for photography internships. Which again are two very different directions. And one of the things that I did during this time to get clarity, because most people were just telling me I was very confused and didn't really know how to help me make a decision, was I did a vision quest. And this is vision quest is kind of more in the realm, or comes from more, I think, traditional cultures and stuff, where you kind of go off on your own, and isolate a bit. And I was sort of, instructed or coached to, basically fast, so only drink water. And it was only a 24-hour thing. And so I was in a little tent up on a mountain ridge, not just, not too far out, nothing dangerous, but so I was in a little tent with just water and a journal to write down thoughts. And that was it. So I wouldn't, again, suggest this if it's medically necessary that you eat, like if you're hypoglycemic or diabetic or something, definitely eat, but, eat on the lighter side, I would say. And to really just isolate and like remove all people, devices, distractions, just so you can truly, truly hear deep within, inspiration and your intuition. And so really the only question is, and you can use this vision quest for whatever you want, but you can use, whether it's like, oh, should I get married, or should I move, or should I have children, or whatever your question is. But in this context, I remember asking, like, which way should I go? Should I pursue medicine or should I pursue photography? And I did actually. I remember I started getting this like kind of vision of, I saw kind of looking down into a valley, and there were like these huts, and I could tell it was like somewhere, some exotic land, foreign land, and it was like, in a rural area. And I also knew that my job or role in that place was one of being a doctor. And so, and I've done that actually. I've actually done that. I've actually gone on medical missions to different areas of the world, almost like a Doctors Without Borders type thing. And so that vision quest did help clarify things for me. So you might try that yourself. Again, the food thing, eat on the lighter side, but if you need to eat for various reasons, don't abstain from food. But the whole point is to really just put all your life energy into listening deep within for the answer to a big life question. I think in general, prayer and meditation, is very helpful, because again, what you're doing is you're tuning within and getting guidance from within. And I think a question to ask when you spend time in prayer and meditation is, how can I serve the highest good or the greatest good? And again, this gets back to the question of, like, sometimes career and calling, sometimes they're two different things. Sometimes they're the same, but sometimes they're two different things. And you can also do journaling. And again, you might journal on questions like, how can I serve the highest good? Or also things like, what do I want my legacy to be, in this life? Kind of thinking towards, if you kind of imagine yourself in your last days and you're looking back, at how you spent 20, 30, 50 years of your life. Sometimes I've heard people say, like, what do you want to be written on your tombstone? And again, it's not necessarily for other people, because tombstones are really for other people. But it's really for, at the end of your time on the earth, at least this time around, what do you really want to leave behind? What do you want your impact to be on the planet? So you might consider that. The other thing is that there's another Bach Flower remedy, Serato, that may be important in this situation, because it may be that you actually are getting guidance. You are, your intuition is telling you go in this direction, but you're not really trusting it or following it. And that can be because your rational mind, what your intuition is telling you to do is getting kind of squashed by your rational mind, because your rational mind is like, how is that supposed to work? That doesn't make sense. It's like, oh, that could be really... And the other thing is that you may not trust your intuition because it's being drowned out by the voices or opinions, thoughts, values, influence of others. And so if you don't trust your own intuition, which is, many people in different contexts would say intuition is really higher guidance from something higher than yourself, then you might be too swayed by other people. Like, again, if, Mother Teresa had gone to a career, counseling office, she probably would have gotten different advice than, like, oh yeah, give up everything and move to India, and work with really sick and poor people. It is what it is. So some other methods and things that can help if this is really a pressing question for you. I wanted to thank you for being here. Thank you for your time. Hopefully you've found this helpful. And actually the photos here I'm talking about, are actually from a trip I took to China, and they were, some of them were part of an exhibit, a solo exhibit I had on my photography called Seeking the Ancient and Modern China. And so what's interesting is that even though photography is not my main gig, most people know me as a physician nowadays, is that actually the photography is really important. Like, I never would have guessed, once I made the decision to go to medical school, I thought I was so busy I'd have to give up photography. But actually I just kept doing it for myself because I enjoyed it, and people would ask me to be part of shows without me really, soliciting anything. And I thought it was just like, maybe for me, maybe it was my medicine, because it helps me, be very meditative when I take walks and I take pictures of things. But actually, I've been doing photography for 20 years, and so I have 20 years of stock photography that I can use for videos like this. So, in a way, for a long time I thought, I guess it's not a professional thing, but it's funny, again, moving in circles rather than moving in straight lines, to see how the photography, sort of came back around and integrated with the medical work and the teaching work and that sort of thing. It was, pretty interesting, again, from a long-term point of view. So again, I hope you found this helpful. Thank you for your time, and until the next one, take care.